Detective Carver, we need to talk to you.
About what? Who's your supervisor?
For over a decade, Miles Carver was considered one of the best detectives in the South Bronx.
I was at work. That's the part I keep coming back to. I was at work. I was doing exactly what I was supposed to be doing. Checking on an elderly client, the same thing I had done hundreds of times before on that same floor in that same building. I stepped into the hallway, and then everything changed. 2 surgeries, 9 days in the hospital. My daughter was 7 years old when it happened. 7 years old, asking me why my face looked different in pictures taken before that night. I didn't have an answer that made sense to a 7-year-old. I barely have one that makes sense to me. When I testified in that courtroom, I said the only thing I knew how to say. I did everything right that night. I was at work. I was doing my job. And the detective who was supposed to protect the people in that building, the man with a gold shield and 13 years on the job and 9 commendations, sent those men there. He used a police database to time it. He relayed patrol positions in real time from a burner phone. He knew exactly when the hallway would be clear, except it wasn't. I still don't understand how someone decides to do that.
What Bernadette Irby described in that federal courtroom was not a consequence anyone had planned for. It was the moment the architecture of a 3-year scheme collided with an innocent woman doing her job in a hallway. Her injury was the detail that finally gave investigators the human cost of what the data had been showing for months. His name was Miles Dion Carver, 41 years old, detective 3rd grade, NYPD 41st Precinct, South Bronx. 13 years on the job, 9 commendations. A departmental recognition for a major narcotics caller in the Mott Haven corridor, the kind of detective his precinct pointed to as an example of what the job could look like. Between March 2020 and August 2022, he used his access to the NYPD Mobile Command Unit Deployment Grid, a real-time map of patrol unit positions across the entire borough, to orchestrate 9 armed robberies of narcotics stash houses. He relayed live patrol coverage gaps to a robbery crew via burner phone. He took cuts totaling over $200,000, and eventually he stopped being the man behind the phone and put on a mask himself. 22 database queries, 9 robberies, 3 years. The Southern District of New York had been building the case for 16 months before anyone approached him. 300 months in federal prison. This is how a decorated detective became the architect of the most brazen institutional betrayal in the history of his precinct. Miles Dion Carver was born in 1984 in the Morrisania section of the Bronx, 8 blocks from the 40th precinct. His father drove MTA buses for 31 years. His mother worked as a home health aide, picking up double shifts on weekends, sometimes 3 clients in a single day. They lived in a 2-bedroom on East 167th Street. Miles shared a room with his younger brother. He was 16 years old when a man named Terrence, a neighbor, a father, someone Miles saw every single day, was shot in front of the corner store on Caldwell Avenue. The case went unsolved. 2 years passed. No arrest. Miles watched his mother lock the front door at sundown for the next 18 months, and somewhere in that silence, he decided he wanted to be the person who solved things. He attended Fordham University on a partial scholarship, working nights at a FedEx hub on Bruckner Boulevard for $11.50 an hour, sorting packages until 2 hours in the morning. He graduated in 2006 with a criminal justice degree and $22,000 in debt. NYPD Police Academy, class of 2011. He finished 11th in a cohort of 214. He requested the 40th precinct specifically. He knew the streets. He thought that mattered. His early performance evaluations read like a template for what the department was hoping to build. Strong situational awareness. Trusted by community contacts in high-tension encounters. Demonstrates initiative in gathering field intelligence. He coached a youth flag football program 2 summers running at Franz Siegel Park. He showed up. He was the kind of officer the department was proud of. He was promoted to detective 3rd grade in 2016, narcotics intelligence. The promotion came with access to systems most officers never touched. Among those systems was the NYPD Mobile Command Unit Deployment Grid, the operational nervous system of the borough. Every patrol unit in a given sector checks in at the start of shift and logs its position throughout. Supervisors can see in real time where coverage is concentrated and where it isn't. For detectives assigned to narcotics task forces, query access to the grid is not a privilege. It's a necessity. Coordinating a raid without knowing where patrol units are positioned is how operations fall apart. The 40th Precinct sector covers roughly 1.3 square miles in the South Bronx. In 2022 alone, the precinct logged more than 4,400 incidents. The deployment grid runs constantly. At any given moment on a Friday night, a task force detective could pull up the sector display and see exactly where coverage was heavy and exactly where a 4-block window had gone quiet. The vulnerability was structural. Query logs were recorded, every access timestamped, every terminal ID noted, but those logs were passive, reviewed only when someone was already under investigation. No system cross-referenced grid queries against unrelated crime reports. No one asked which detectives were querying coverage in sectors with no active cases. The trust that made the system work was the same trust that made it exploitable. In early 2020, Carver was reassigned to a joint task force tracking mid-level fentanyl distribution in the Melrose and Mott Haven corridors. The assignment gave him something he hadn't had before, a reason to query the deployment grid that no supervisor would question. He could check which units were out. He could see the gaps. He could see exactly when and where the system was thinnest. He recognized the opportunity immediately. March 7th, 2020. Carver had been building an intelligence file on a fentanyl distribution point on Melrose Avenue, a mid-level operation run out of a second-floor apartment. He was supposed to be developing a legitimate case. Instead, at 10:41 that night, he opened the mobile command unit display and confirmed a single patrol unit in the Melrose sector, positioned 3 blocks from the address. He picked up a prepaid phone bought for cash at a Fordham Road electronics shop and sent a voice message to a man named Lamont Page. 4 men entered the apartment 6 minutes later, $74,000 in cash and 900 grams of narcotics. No units responded in time. Carver was logged into the department system from his home computer when it happened. A task force detective checking in remotely after hours, routine enough that no supervisor gave it a second look. He drove to the precinct the next morning and filed a routine duty report. For the first 7 jobs, he never entered a location himself. He was the intelligence layer and nothing more. He identified targets through his confidential informant files and task force surveillance data. He timed each robbery to a patrol coverage gap he could see on the grid in real time. He relayed sector positions to Page via burner in his own voice, typically within 15 minutes of the crew moving. The jobs were clean. Too clean. They hit, they left. Patrol units arrived to empty apartments. By mid-2021, Carver had received cuts totaling more than $200,000. Deposited in increments across accounts held by his mother and a cousin. The crew hit 5 more locations through 2021. Each one timed to a grid gap, each one targeted through intelligence Carver had developed legitimately and then turned criminal. By the summer of 2022, the structure had shifted. Carver began attending the robberies himself, masked, armed with an unregistered Glock 19. He was no longer the man behind the phone. He was inside the apartments. August 19, 2022, East 156th Street. The crew hit a stash house connected to a distributor Carver had been surveilling for months. At 9:12 p.m., he recorded a voice message on the burner. Unhurried, matter of fact. Single unit, East 156, 3 blocks north, windows open. What no one had accounted for was Bernadette Irby. She had come to the building to check on an elderly client in the apartment directly next to the target. She stepped into the hallway at the wrong moment. She was struck with a firearm. Her left orbital socket was fractured in 2 places. She was hospitalized for 9 days. She would require 2 reconstructive surgeries. She had no connection to narcotics activity of any kind. The Bronx DA's office had flagged a pattern of suspiciously precise stash house hits as early as late 2021. Clean entries, minimal forensic trace, always in low coverage windows. No responding units ever arriving in time. An analyst wrote a memo. It went to a supervisor. It sat for 3 months without follow-up. By the time anyone looked at it again, the crew had hit 2 more locations. In January 2023, the NYPD's Internal Affairs Bureau launched a borough-wide data review of robbery patterns in the Bronx as part of a new statistical pattern analysis mandate. It was the kind of administrative exercise that generated reports and rarely generated arrests. Detective Sonia Tremaine was the IAB analyst assigned to the review. 6 years with internal affairs. Methodical. No particular reason to suspect anyone at the start. She was simply doing the work. On February 2, 2023, 34 days into the review, Tremaine pulled the deployment grid query logs for the period spanning January 2020 through December 2022 and began cross-referencing them against the timestamps of high-value robbery incidents in the Melrose, Mott Haven, and Hunts Point corridors. She found it within the first pass: 9 robberies, 9 grid query windows, the same terminal ID appearing in the logs within 15 minutes of each incident. The terminal belonged to Detective Miles Dion Carver, badge 4471. She ran the numbers twice. Then she brought the file to her supervisor and requested an FBI consultation. An FBI data analyst from the Southern District of New York calculated the probability of the correlation occurring by random chance at less than 0.3%. A parallel federal investigation opened the following week. Carver was not informed. His grid access was not revoked. They wanted to watch him. He made 3 more queries in the following month, each one logged, March 14, 2023. Search warrants executed simultaneously at Carver's department workstation, personal laptop, and his apartment on Walton Avenue. In a hollowed-out speaker cabinet in the bedroom closet, agents found 2 prepaid Motorola phones. One had been factory reset, wiped completely. The other had not. On the second phone, 22 voice memos and 11 text messages. The voice memos were recorded in Carver's voice. Each was time-stamped. Each corresponded within 15 minutes to a robbery incident. The clearest, recorded at 9:12 p.m. on August 19, 2022, 11 minutes before the East 156th Street robbery. Carver's voice, unhurried, matter-of-fact. Single unit, East 156, 3 blocks north, windows open. The financial investigation confirmed the pattern. $312,000 deposited across accounts held by Carver's mother and a cousin over 32 months. No tax return. No income source. The cousin cooperated within 48 hours. Lamont Page was arrested March 22nd. Facing a federal conspiracy charge with a mandatory minimum of 10 years, he retained counsel, received a proffer letter, and provided a full account within 5 days. He named all 5 crew members. He identified Carver's specific role in each documented robbery. He described conversations in which Carver relayed real-time patrol positions. He turned over the communication log from his own burner. It matched Carver's log, message for message. September 11th, 2023, 6:52 in the morning. The parking garage beneath Carver's apartment building on Walton Avenue, level 2. He came off the elevator in plain clothes, gym bag on one shoulder, coffee in the other hand, keys out. Due at the precinct by 8, FBI Special Agent Broderick Ashby and 2 additional agents came in from the east stairwell. Sonia Tremaine and 2 IAB officers came in from the vehicle ramp. They approached from 3 directions simultaneously. Ashby called his name first. Carver stopped. He processed the scene in a fraction of a second. Federal credentials, the positioning, the number of people. He said what officers say when something like this happens to them. He was on the job. He was NYPD. There had to be a mistake. Ashby told him to put the bag down. Tremaine stepped forward. She named the 9 robberies. She named the 22 queries. She told him his voice was on the burner. There was a pause, the first real pause since he'd come off the elevator. When Carver spoke again, his voice had changed, quieter, measured. Those were drug dealers. Nobody got hurt who wasn't already in that life. Ashby didn't raise his voice. Bernadette Irby was a home health aide detective. Carver's coffee cup dropped. It hit the concrete, bounced once, and rolled toward the drain in the center of the garage floor. He did not look at it. He did not look at anything in particular. I want a lawyer. Then he said nothing else. Federal indictment, October 3rd, 2023. 8 counts. Hobbs Act robbery conspiracy, use and brandishing of a firearm in furtherance of a violent crime, obstruction of justice, and aggravated identity theft for using his law enforcement credentials to access restricted government systems to plan and facilitate violent felonies. Trial began February 10th, 2024 at 500 Pearl Street in Manhattan. 10 days, 41 witnesses. Lamont Page testified for 2 full days. The August 19th voice memo was played in full in open court. Carver's voice, the timestamp, the sector coordinates, followed immediately by the dispatch log showing the East 156th Street call coming in 11 minutes later. Bernadette Irby testified during the victim impact phase. 2 surgeries, 9 days in the hospital. A 7-year-old daughter asking why her mother's face looked different in old photographs. I did everything right that night, she said. I was at work. I was doing my job, and the detective who was supposed to protect the people in that building sent those men there. I still don't understand how someone decides to do that, Hector Fuentes testified after her. He had owned his Melrose Avenue bodega for 14 years. His father had opened it in 1987. I called the police the night they robbed me, he said. An officer came. He was professional. He shook my hand. I never once questioned whether the information that sent those men to my door came from the same precinct. I trusted the system completely. That trust was a mistake. The jury deliberated 9 hours across 2 days, guilty on all 8 counts. At sentencing, Judge Chin addressed Carver directly. What distinguishes your case is not the dollar figure. What distinguishes it is the architecture. You used the infrastructure of this department, the tools built specifically to protect the people of this borough, as a weapon against them. Every query you made on that grid was a deliberate choice. You made 22 of them over 3 years with full knowledge of what would follow. 300 months in federal prison, 25 years, $2,440,000 in restitution, lifetime bar from law enforcement, government employment, or any position of public trust, designated to USP Thompson in Thompson, Illinois. A high-security federal facility, projected release, 2049. The 40th Precinct held a mandatory integrity briefing the following Monday. 3 months later, the department announced a new policy. Deployment grid queries by task force detectives now require supervisor co-authorization for any sector outside their active case files. The gap Carver had found, measured, and exploited for 3 years was finally closed. He had also been filing the police reports for the same robberies he organized.
I went back to work. I want people to know that. I went back to checking on my clients. Same buildings, same elevators, same hallways. Because my clients needed me, and because I was not going to let what happened that night take that away from me too. But I think about it. I won't pretend I don't. He had 13 years on that job, 9 commendations. He knew those streets. He grew up near those streets. He chose to work those streets specifically because he said he knew them and he cared about what happened to the people on them. And then for 3 years, he sat at a police database, checked where the patrol units were, and sent a robbery crew into buildings in the same neighborhoods he had sworn to protect. He said in that parking garage that nobody got hurt who wasn't already in that life. I was in a hallway doing my job. The judge sentenced him to 25 years. I don't know if that's enough. I don't know what enough looks like for something like this. I know that my daughter is 10 years old now. I know that she still sometimes asks me questions about that night that I don't know how to answer. I know that Hector Fuentes called the police the night his bodega was robbed and shook the hand of the officer who came, never knowing that a detective from the same precinct may have sent the crew to his door. I know that the people in those neighborhoods trusted the system completely. And I know that the man they trusted most in that system was the one dismantling it from the inside. 25 years. I hope he thinks every single day about what that trust was worth and what he decided to do with it.